The first ship to sail from Liverpool across the Atlantic Ocean in 1699 took just under 1 year to reach America and then on to Barbados. The reason for that journey was slavery. During the slave trade, Liverpool's ships were responsible for transporting 1.5 million slaves across the ocean to America and Barbados. A piece of Liverpool history that some would rather forget. However, it played a major part in shaping not only this city, but the UK as a whole and the world as we know today. Liverpool was one of the most imperially connected cities during the British Empire. Local industry and commerce sent residents to all parts of the British Empire, while migrants flocked here from all corners of the British Isles, especially Ireland, all in search of better work, better life. Huge numbers of Irish immigrants came to Liverpool, and by 1851 the unceasing waves of Irish people coming to the city formed about a quarter of the local population. What started as a few streets by a muddy little river soon became one of the most exciting and appealing cities in the United Kingdom. Back in the early 1900s, during British general election campaigns, hecklers shouted out for parliamentary candidates to discuss Chinese slavery. Chinese people first arrived in Liverpool around 1834 to trade goods from the Far East. As many as 20,000 Chinese worked in Liverpool's shipping industry. They helped keep the merchant navy afloat and thus helped fuel and feed the British people. In 1942, the Chinese went on strike for equal pay and better rights. After 4 months of striking, they were labelled as troublemakers by the ship owners. Then they had their pay cut even more and they were offered one-way tickets back to China. Then, in 1945, the police in Liverpool and the immigration started to forcibly round up and arrest the Chinese. They would go out in wagons in the middle of the night looking for Chinese walking the streets. They would raid Chinese boarding houses and throw them in the back of these wagons and then take them down to the police station where they were sent back to China. Some of the Chinese men, they would come down here to the docks, they would meet their friends and then they would disappear forever, never to come back. So this building, built in 1911, is the Liver building, and it was purposely built at the time to provide financial assistance to locals who lost an income earning relative. And it was one of the first buildings using reinforced concrete, and it stands at just under 100 meters tall. And as you can see on the top, those are the fabled liver birds. And legend has it that if those liver birds were to fly away, then Liverpool would cease to exist. In 2017, the building was sold for the first time in history for a whopping £48 million to an investment group, and the main shareholder of the investment group, Farid Moshiri, he also bought Everton Football Club. and he said he was going to use this building and put his own office in the building so he could see Everton's new stadium just down the road. This is the Cunard building, founded in 1940, concerned not just with shipping across the Atlantic to the United States, but it also sent ships and had shipping routes over to the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and by the end of the Second World War it was one of the biggest or largest transatlantic passenger lines. So we're heading up this street in front of us now. This is Water Street, and Water, as you can see, all very impressive old buildings down here. But this Water Street had one of the very first tower blocks that went up in the city, and that tower block became Liverpool's jail. And it held some very notorious gangsters and criminals and prisoners of war. But there's some interesting things that I'm going to show you down here. So right across the street here is the iconic Martins Bank. It was built in around 1932. Formerly it was Barclays Bank, a more wider known British bank. Anyway, we're going to go and have a look. There's some interesting things to look at on this building. So as you can see in the doorway here, it commemorates the role of banks in financing the slave trade. There are two young boys, and they're actually shackled around the necks, around the arms or the wrists, and also around the ankles. And you can also see they're carrying money bags, and these look typical of two typical Blackmores. Apparently Herbert Rose, the architect, was inspired by his visit to America. He was also a very clever man who understood the meaning of symbolism. This is Nelson's monument, and this commemorates Admiral Horatio Nelson. So on the top, I don't know if you can see very clearly, but we've got a naked Nelson, and he's on top of a cannon, and it all glorifies victory. And then we've got a skeleton emerging from under a draped flag, and then around here we've got shackled prisoners of war. And I believe these apparently are Nelson's victories. One of them represents the River Nile, and one of them represents the Battle of Trafalgar, and also one of them represents Copenhagen. And it was publicly funded, and there are a lot of debates around it as it symbolises prisoners of war and slavery. What's quite remarkable is the proximity of Martins Bank just over here and this statue just over here, both of them commemorating slavery, and both of them contemporary towards it. So back in the day, this square right in front of the town hall was the main commercial centre for merchants directly involved in profiting from the slave trade. And everything was for sale here: sugar, cotton, to ships, country estates, everything a merchant would need to join the slave trade. You could even buy shekels and chains and guns. So Liverpool is not only home to one of the first Chinese communities in the UK and the largest Chinese community in Europe, but it's also home to one of the first black communities. However, they too have experienced unrest, with race riots going back to the time of the First World War. In 1919, when white seamen returning from war arrived back in Liverpool and blamed black seamen for the lack of jobs, a white mob formed, and they chased a young man from Bermuda. Not literally, but they chased him all the way down here, and they chased him down to the River Mersey, where they stoned him and pelted him with stones until he died. Black people have been coming to Liverpool as sailors, soldiers and slaves for over 300 years. Liverpool was built by slavers' money, and the bankers grew fat off the whipped backs of Africans when they were bankrolling cargoes of strange fruit bound for the Americas. Liverpool owned 80% of the slave trade in Great Britain, overshadowing the country's own capital. Kurds, or Kurdish people, are a more recent addition to Liverpool's makeup. Kurds are a native Iranian ethnic group, native to the mountainous regions of Kurdistan, and also with communities over in Western Turkey. After World War I and the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, Western allies made provisions for a Kurdish state. However, that promise was soon broken, and Kurds were left with minority status in their new countries. Kurdish people first started to arrive in Britain in the 1980s from Iraq, Iran, Syria, and they were all fleeing from oppression. Anyway, we're now on, I think it's London Street, and down here there's quite a few like Kurdish restaurants, Kurdish cafes, and it's lunchtime. I'm pretty hungry, so we're gonna go and check something out. So I found a little place across the street here, Abu Hassan Grill. Just wait for the traffic and we'll go and check it out. Guy there. So this here and here, this is very typical Kurdish food. Got some shawarma. Gonna have this one, I think. Lamb kudzi is very nice. It comes with rice, biryani, soup, salad. So the first dish has arrived. I think it's chickpea soup, and it's just what I need because it's nice and hot, this. Thank you.
No worries, mate.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, that's all right, thanks. So it's just arrived. We've got the pilau rice. We've got some lamb here. This lamb's really nice. It's very soft, very tender. And we've got some okra, lady's finger. You can see there, okra in a tomato sauce and a little salad. And I'm going to tuck in now this. This is a lot of food. This will really fill me up, and all of this is about £9. Very nice. Look at that meat, really tender, just breaks, flakes off. To put over the salad. Some nice pickled red cabbage. So that's done, and I'm stuffed. I'm going to pay up there's somewhere just across the street where I want to go. So it's worth checking out that place if you're in this neck of the woods. Very tasty meals. And we're just going down here. Whoops. So I'm going to check out the Cabello barber studio. It's only £10 for a haircut. So he's busy. He's got a couple of customers at the moment. But I think I'll go in, I'll sit down and I'll wait. I was far too long in that barber shop. I was in there well over an hour. Anyway, he gave me an half decent trim and it was about £10. He was very focused on what he was doing, so I didn't want to start sticking the camera in his face. I must have passed about 10 of these Kurdish barbers. There's one there, there's one across the street. They're everywhere. This is the main gate to Chinatown. The original Chinatown was back over where we started today's video, over by the docks. But during the Second World War it was heavily bombed and it relocated over here. And now today about 2% of the population here in Liverpool is of Chinese origin. After soaring financially and making so much money from the slave trade over the centuries, Liverpool took a harsh dive in the 21st century, and many people who relied upon an income from working on the docks, all the docks closed down, all the warehouses closed down, and Liverpool's unemployment rate went to one of the highest in the UK. The city had fallen into dereliction and disrepair, and in the 80s schemes were introduced to try and redevelop the city, starting over at the waterfront where we've just come from. By 2003, the last of the exclusive spaces over on the Docklands were sold, and once again the city started to attract visitors from worldwide, drawn by two premier football clubs and the legendary Beatles. So this pub here is very appropriately named the William Gladstone pub. William Gladstone served 12 years as the UK's Prime Minister starting in 1868, and his father was one of the biggest slave owners in the UK. But William Gladstone, he was very much opposed to the slave trade and started like an abolishment of the slave trade, and he was also very much opposed to the sending of opium to China, so he kind of had a bit of influence on that. Anyway, I think this is going to be the end of the video here now, because I'm going to go inside and have a little tipple, and as you can see it's getting very dark. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned and I'll see you in the next one.